Greetings and salutations. This is Abdelhadi with The Bitter Truth, where we may not have all the answers, but we're going to ask an awful lot of questions. You can also become a member or support the show through thebittertruth.info, INFO. We appreciate the support. And also, if you would, just subscribe on YouTube. That's free. And you can just subscribe and get notifications when we drop a show. Like that. So like I said, we appreciate the support. If you go onto the website and you want to buy a t-shirt or whatever, you don't want to subscribe to Patreon, I get it, but subscribing to Patreon won't kill you either. And it would help us out dramatically. So today I'm going to spend a little time talking about the JFK assassination. I'll get into it later, but I went to the library the other day and just watched Oliver Stone's new documentary on Showtime, which there's a 4-hour version that's coming out, but the 2-hour version on Showtime is really, really good. It's based on James DiEugenio's book, if you haven't read it. And came out in 2013, I think. It's about 500 plus pages, not super long compared to the crap that Vincent Bugliosi wrote. I can't even say his last name sometimes. The James DiEugenio book is called Reclaiming Parkland. And that's a great book on the subject. If you think you know a lot about the assassination, which I thought I did. There's way more things that he compiled from the 2 million pages that were released in the 90s, since the 90s, since the ARRB went over the HSCA stuff. And out of those 2 million pages, which by the way, is still not the report that Trump promised to release and that Biden promised to release. That's not going to be released till 2029. And that was established by the House Senate Committee on Assassination, or the House Committee on Assassinations. Anyway, long story short, that's the report that's not forthcoming. However, the 2 million pages that have been released are pretty substantial, because basically it just dispels anything that Vincent Bugliosi wrote in his crap-ass book called Reclaiming History. And then Gerald Posner wrote a book called Case Closed a while back. And interesting enough, he got in front of the Senate and testified, which is basically perjury, because there's like 9 people he claimed to have interviewed in that book that swear up and down that he never spoke to them. So there's a lot of things that both of those books leave out. The Bugliosi book specifically took him 21 years to write, and he never really left his office. He never went to Dallas. He never went to the archives. He never went to Bethesda, where the autopsy happened after they flew his body out of Dallas. On and on and on and on and on. So while I am definitely not, I'm a layman in this. Let's just say that I'm not an expert. I'm not some of these guys that Oliver Stone interviews. And I won't say it's a hobby, because that's kind of a grim, dreadful hobby, but it's something that's fascinated me for a very long time. And I remember viciously defending the JFK film that came out in 1991 that Oliver Stone directed, based on what they had at the time, which is amazing when you watch it today. This is after the ARRB, the Assassination Records Review Board, that Clinton and Janet Reno authorized 1994, 1998. They still didn't have a whole lot of money, but they got a lot done. And that came out after the Stone film, because that got him in front of the Senate. And, he wasn't wrong. And so for people to say that Oswald acted alone, I like to challenge my more macho listeners. If you think Oswald acted alone, frankly, you've never shot a gun, period. And that's it. And if you think that a pristine bullet can come out of 7 wounds, well, let's dive right into it. So as far as the most botched autopsy in history, let's start with some of the basics. I've talked to some doctors about this, and this was genuinely botched on purpose. For example, Kennedy's wounds. We'll hang on Connolly for a hot second, because he was alive, so they didn't have to do an autopsy. But Kennedy's wounds were never dissected for the trajectory or the path of the shots, meaning they never took his brain and determined the path of the bullet through his brain, right? They never dissected the quote unquote throat wound. Supposedly it was supposed to be an in and out, which it wasn't. We'll get to that here in a second. But this is basic autopsy 101. I mean, let's be honest, gang members get better autopsies than JFK did. As I mentioned, the ARB was limited in funding, but they were able to declassify 2 million pages of documentation. And the HSCA is still sealed, like I said, until 2029. Neither Obama or Trump or Biden would get that released, even though they did promise to do that, especially Biden, especially Trump. Obama paid some tepid lip service, but Trump ran on that, and so did Biden, by the way. And then you look at when Kennedy got shot in the head. There was a piece of brain missing about the size of a fist. And this is what's interesting. The average male brain from 35 to 50, remember Kennedy was 46 when he got killed, is approximately 1,336 grams, right? So despite missing a fist-sized piece of his brain, Kennedy's brain weighed in, according to the guys at Bethesda, at 1,336. But they never found that hunk of brain, because if you ever seen there was nothing to find. If you ever see the Zapruder film, when he takes that shot, a good portion of his head goes spraying about 3 or 4 feet into the air. So I don't really know if there was any brain to find. I know Jackie Kennedy jumped onto the back of the trunk of the limo and recovered a piece of brain that she held onto, thinking, I don't know, she's probably in shock, probably thinking you could put it back or something. But there's no record of any brain sectioning at all. That kind of speaks to the dissection of the wounds that I mentioned earlier. And if there was a sectioning of the brain, where are the photos? There's no photos of this. There's some drawings, but there were no photos of this. The Lincoln convertible that they were driving in with the suicide doors got taken into the shop that afternoon to be repaired. It was never gone over by forensic police. They didn't go through the limo to see what bullets did what. If you recall, John Connally, the governor of Texas at that time, took 4 wounds. One went through his back, and supposedly went through his back, hit his wrist, bounced out of his wrist, and went into his thigh. The same bullet that shot Kennedy through the throat, supposedly. So that's, yeah. But let's kind of dive into some point by point things here, which I got out of chapter 6 of James DiEugenio's book. I think that these points, I mean, it's a 500-page plus book, so I think 540 or something like that. I've read it a couple of times, but the cool thing about this book is that there's so many things that it goes after. But specifically in chapter 6, there's a bunch of points that I think even the layman, straight down the middle consumer of news that just, believes what they're told. And, they like to think Oswald acted alone because, let's be honest, if you can get away with killing a president in broad daylight in a major American city, then who the fuck are we? And that's another point that the JFK film made eloquently. And it's something that I probably read 75 times from 75 other guys who've written on this subject, because that is the big point. We don't have a democracy. If you think we have one now, you're definitely out of your mind. But that had to be the beginning of the end, or maybe the beginning of the middle of the end. That's a whole other philosophical discussion. But Oswald was interviewed for 15 hours by Dallas police. Excuse me, I'm drinking a whiskey and soda. That's my first one too, by the way. So don't expect me to be ranting too terribly. So Oswald was interviewed for 15 hours by Dallas police, and there's just no record of that. Where's the record of that? Why would you not have a record of that? The other thing was, according to Texas law, which didn't fucking matter, we were supposed to conduct the autopsy at Parkland Hospital, or at least at the coroner's office in Dallas, right? What happened was within about an hour and a half, they had Kennedy's body wrapped up and put into a bronze casket and put on the airplane and taken right back. It was basically a getaway, taken right back to Bethesda. The military were present at the autopsy, and they were limiting what could and could not be recorded. They were real strong arm about it. And according to Cyril Recht, I can't even say his name today, Cyril Wecht, W-E-C-H-T. He's a former president of the American Academy of Forensic Sciences. There was 100 top professional forensic guys within an hour drive or flight from Bethesda. Now, one would think that if you're flying the body of the president back, it's about a 3-hour flight, you could notify people to come do that. They did not do that. None of these guys were called in. Another thing that's interesting is Arlen Specter, he was a lawyer at the time. He was a federal prosecutor. They put him on the Warren Commission basically to control the optics. And he co-opted Dr. James Hughes's and Dr. J. Thornton Boswell's recollections of the bullet wounds. And since their notes went missing, he made them just go from memory and write a report from that. No pictures, no they weren't present at the autopsy, but they had to recount their notes that had gone missing, which is beyond ridiculous. Again, this is the most botched autopsy in the history of ever. It's the president of the United States. And I don't care how you feel about JFK as a Republican or a Democrat or a liberal or a conservative. I don't care how you feel about any president. We shouldn't be shooting presidents. Not in a democracy, and not getting away with it. The guys that did get away with it, Allen Dulles and all the rest. If you recall, Kennedy fired Dulles late 1961, mostly because of the Bay of Pigs, and also he was pulling some other crap. And so Kennedy fired him and his two top guys, replaced him with what's his face? Let me a second. Anyway, so when the Warren Commission got put together, they put Dulles on that. That guy is put there to cover up for the CIA. That's just a fact. No credible evidence exists to connect the back and throat wounds. The back wound specifically, if you ever see the pictures, the back wound, and it is a back wound, it was never through the back of his neck. The back wound was about 5 inches below the collarbone, right? Now, Gerald Ford would take a pen later and raise the back wound up through his neck, and to coincide with the throat wound, which was now diagnosed as a, quote, entry wound. But Dr. Malcolm Perry, that day at the hospital, gave Kennedy a tracheotomy to try to help with his breathing. And I don't even know if he was breathing when they got him in, because that shot to the head was pretty grim. But he had said that it was an entry wound, because he had performed the tracheotomy on the throat of the president to get him to help him breathe. So if he's saying it's an entry wound, and he should know, and then he later changes his testimony, says that it wasn't an entry wound, that it was an exit wound, that he was just confused, well, then that kind of makes all sense, doesn't it? But if you don't dissect those wounds, and there's no record of a dissected wound, then we don't know when the entry point was or when the exit point was. That's the point of dissecting wounds, especially in, when it's a stabbing or bullet wounds. You want to see how the bullets went. Where could they have come from? But if you don't have this stuff recorded, then you can just say whatever, which is what the Warren Commission did. They said that 3 bullets caused 7 wounds, 1 bullet specifically performing the amazing magic trick of going through Kennedy's throat, into Connolly's back, through Connolly's chest, into his wrist, bouncing out of his wrist after he shatters a bone, and then going into his thigh. That's amazing. That's like David Copperfield level stuff. So okay, I covered that. Okay, I covered that. Okay. So here's the thing. So only 1 bullet was found. The magic bullet, the one that we have seen so many times. And that might not even be the bullet. If you read the book, or if you see the documentary, the new Stone documentary, the point is really documented that it may not be the same bullet, because everybody that handled the bullet initialed it with a marker, and the bullet that's sitting in the archives is not marked at all. So, and it's a pristine, perfect bullet. And the theory is that when they were trying to do CPR, that the bullet came out of his back and just dropped out. If you know anything about bullet wounds, bullets, it's not like a clean tunnel. A bullet doesn't just come out because you're pushing on the guy's chest. It's not going to come out of his back. And by the way, why would the bullet come out of his back when the Warren Commission claims that it didn't go into his back? It went into the back of his neck and came out his throat, right? I mean, shoot, at least with Tupac, they found all the bullets, right? Which brings us to Dr. James Humes, who destroyed his notes, destroyed the first draft of his autopsy report. And his excuse is he didn't, I guess they got a little blood on him. So his excuse was he didn't want them to be a morbid curiosity, which I find fascinating. How can you say that this important document is going to be a morbid curiosity? It would be under such heavy guard like everything else. But it kind of didn't matter. That was the excuse that they had accepted. Specter did not interview JFK's personal physician who signed the death certificate. A guy named, it was a rear admiral named Dr. George Berkeley. Specter didn't even talk to him. Why wouldn't you talk to the guy who signed his death certificate? He was present at the autopsy, right? And he saw what he saw. Why wouldn't you talk to him? Because you're not trying to get to the bottom of this. The pathologist didn't even look at JFK's clothes or actual photos before writing the report. The Warren, contributing to the Warren Commission report. So you're a pathologist. Your job is to check forensic evidence. The bullet holes in his clothes would tell you some things, and you didn't actually look at the photos of the autopsy. You're just going from what? From memory or what they told you. In 1966, the media, the DOJ, and Dr. Boswell conspired is probably a strong word, but they planned it out. They all said the same shit. So I guess it's a conspiracy. And that's a felony, by the way. It's not a theory. There is a felony called conspiracy, and approximately 2,000 people a year serve time in jail for just perjury because it's a felony. So conspiracy is the same thing. It's a count, like perjury is a count. So if you conspire to rob a bank, they got you for robbing the bank and the conspiracy to rob the bank. So that's 2 counts, you see. But here's the thing. They decided to lie. The back wound being through the neck. Humes followed up in 1967 with a similar proposal, but then, he conveniently destroyed his notes too. What is this with the destroying the notes business, right? 1968, a separate report raised the head wound now. If you remember the head wound, the back into the left, right? And you see the head explode, right? So they raised the head wound another 4 inches to justify, and calling it an entrance wound, to justify the Oswald theory that he shot from behind from the book depository and hit Kennedy in the back of the head. Now, they called it an entry point, like I said, but in 1977, during the HSCA hearings, pathologists shot that square in the ass because they brought, they brought actual pictures with them. It just keeps getting stranger and stranger. And so I don't know. It's like, again, when you get into what was going to be lost if Kennedy survived, he's making inroads to Indonesia, close to 1 billion people. They were socialist, and we didn't want them to be socialist. So, there was that. There was also a failed coup attempt in France, believe it or not. We were going to try to overthrow de Gaulle. And, there's 4 generals that were kind of behind this with Allen Dulles. When the plot got discovered, the French ambassador lost his shit and, went after Kennedy and said, "Hey, what the hell? What's going on? I thought you guys supported our government." And Kennedy's like, "No, I'm fine. I have nothing against de Gaulle, and he's a great hero, World War II and everything. And I got nothing against him. But you have to understand, there's elements of my government I don't control." Now, that is shocking for a president to say. Vietnam, we had advisors there, but we were not committing ground troops, right? And so when about 600 people died in 1963, Kennedy had committed to pull troops out of Vietnam. And this isn't a memo, right? It was going to be 1,000 people by the end of 63. By the end of 64, everybody comes home. And that wasn't going to go down really well. CIA did not want that to happen. The Pentagon didn't want that to happen. And if you know anything about the Bay of Pigs or even the Cuban Missile Crisis, the Joint Chiefs were pretty close to pulling a coup and overthrowing Kennedy. And their chatter was really dangerous at that time. But to continue, so you look at Michael Baden, who later was the chairman of the HSCA, ordered his artist to embellish the photos to make the phony location more credible. And he was also responsible for some major BS, including sealing the records until 2029 after the HSCA wrapped up their investigation. It's really shocking because by 2029, everyone's dead. Everyone's dead now. There's nobody alive. From the Warren Commission, Gerald Ford's dead, Arnold Inspector's dead. Everybody's dead. Everyone's dead. So why seal the documents? Why seal the HSCA report? My theory is because if you release the HSCA report, it's going to be even more damning against the U.S. government, that the U.S. government actually had something to do with the murder of a sitting president in broad daylight in a major American city, and they got away with it. And we pretty much did nothing about it. Now, according to two ballistics experts, the part of the bullet that was supposed to be in this new location, remember they moved the head wound up, cannot be there via the x-rays, right? John Stringer testified that he did not take the pictures of JFK's brain that are in the National Archives. So who did, if he didn't do it? And why is that brain not really reflective of the injuries that JFK sustained? Okay. Elmer Moore, who's a Secret Service agent, got Dr. Malcolm Perry, if you recall, he was the doctor at Parkland who said that the throat wound was an entrance wound. So Elmer Moore got Dr. Perry to change his story from the entrance wound in the throat to being an exit wound. But you need an entrance wound for that. Hence, moving the back wound up more than 7 inches from where his shoulder blade was to the back of his neck. And none of the bullets were ever recovered out of Kennedy's body, which is interesting because supposedly the one went through. They never found the bullet that went through his brain. So there you go. But it's pretty scary because I just don't understand how, and I don't know if people do this anymore. The last conversation I had with someone who told me he believed that Oswald acted alone was about 6 or 7 years ago. And I have to be honest with you, I was shocked when he said this. I've known this guy for a long time. And we used to talk about this stuff quite a lot. And then all of a sudden, there's some background to this that I'm not telling you in the interest of privacy. But it still kind of surprised me that he was buying into this crap. Now, before I did this, I live in Austin, Texas, and I live around 3 hours from Dallas, 2.5 hours from Dallas. So I went to the JFK Assassination Museum, which, to be honest with you, is kind of a piece of shit. It's basically a big testament to the Warren Commission. It's just saying Oswald acted alone and just confirms all the, the bullshit of the Warren Commission. And I was there about 2009, but my attitude was pretty shitty. I went because I was out there for work when I was still living in LA. And me and some friends went and, saw the sniper's nest where Oswald was supposedly, there shooting the president. And it's an amazing recreation because Oswald's not there either. It's an old joke and I stole it. But like I said, my attitude was also less analytical because I knew I was walking into some, BS. But this time I was going to go up there to kind of really get a good look. And if you ever been there, you can't get to the window, which I find interesting. You figure they would, make it so that, you can't jump out the window or anything like that, but, at least put plastic up and at least get to where you're close enough so you can see. Because if you go to Dealey Plaza, there's 2 X's in the road on Elm Street where Kennedy gets hit in the throat first. And then the second X is where he gets shot in the head. And I've been to the grassy knoll and, easy shot. So there was multiple shooters that day, and the witnesses that were there, over 60 of them, all of whom died within like 5 years, with the exception of a couple of people. It was really uncanny. But they all said the same thing. They heard multiple shots. And another thing, Kenny O'Donnell, who was chief of staff for JFK, and another aide named Dave Powers were both World War II vets, and they were in the car behind JFK. And they both said that they heard multiple gunshots, and it was definitely a triangulation going on. And these guys were in World War II, not peeling potatoes in Italy or whatever, or France. They were being shot at. They were in World War II. They saw combat, and they were shot at. They know what gunfire is, and they know what being caught in a crossfire is. So they swore to that up and down. Again, now when I went to the Kennedy Library, I mean, all the if you know anything about this case, the people that satisfy the Warren Commission, David Ferry, Guy Bannister, those guys, they're all over the place. They're all over that museum, because they're only there to show the narrative, to serve the narrative. Now, like I said, when you see the sniper's nest, it was just, you can't get past. The point I was going to make a second ago, and I forgot to make this point. They got the boxes kind of arranged the way supposedly it was there when Oswald was there, but then it's surrounded by all this acrylic, this 6 foot tall acrylic wall. So you can look through it and you kind of look out the window, but you can't get close to the window to see what the sniper might have seen, if indeed he was there, which he was not. And that has been more than conclusively proven. Especially in the book Reclaiming Parkland, you got to read that book. And if you don't have time to read the book, you want to see it on Showtime, to our documentary, I highly recommend reading it or watching it. But something hit me when I was there is, okay, because if you've ever been to the 6th floor museum, it's pretty spacey now. It's just, a bunch of displays and pictures and things like that. And, here's Jackie Kennedy's, clothes, and here's the suit of the cop that, was walking Oswald out of the thing in Dallas. You remember that tall guy in the light colored suit, that's there and shit like that. But something hit me as I was going to the elevator. There was another spot, again, covered in acrylic, where the gun was stashed, supposedly. And it's probably not even the same gun that Oswald had ordered. And that's another fishy part that the book really gets into. But as I was walking toward the stairs to go up to the 7th floor to check that out, I noticed that, wow, this corner is perpendicular to where the sniper's nest is. So I went back to the sniper's nest, walking pretty fast. I made it to that other corner within 30 seconds. Okay. Now, here's the thing. If you've ever seen pictures of the 6th floor depository, it was filled with boxes, just like a hoarder's nightmare. It was just boxes and boxes, creating all these like little hallways and corridors to get through the boxes. And they were all obviously lined up and numbered so that, if you needed certain textbooks, you can find them, because it was a school book depository, right? Well, if I could make it walking fast in 30 seconds, right, just crossing the museum, imagine now having to navigate all through those boxes. And he's probably moving. If he did it, he's moving fast, obviously. That would have taken a good 45 seconds just to get there, much less to hide the gun, and then run down 4 flights of stairs to be on the 2nd floor lunchroom, where supposedly Roy Truly, his boss, and another officer named Marion, Dallas police, were coming up the stairs within 2 minutes, within minutes of the assassination. And there were 3 women coming down the stairs, right, who didn't see anyone on the stairs. So like I said, if I can make it in 30 seconds with nothing there, it probably took them a good 45 seconds to make it, to hide the gun, then go ahead and run down 4 flights of stairs and get into the lunchroom. They're saying he did that all in 2 minutes, inside of 2 minutes. Now, as I said, there were 3 witnesses. And it's interesting that the Warren Commission only interviewed one. And she said, well, there's two other women that were with me. Oh, we don't need to talk to them. We have you. Point being was they were going to discredit her, which they did. She said that she was on the fifth floor watching the motorcade, saw the assassination, got to the stairs, went down the stairs. No one, and then her boss, who was upstairs, came down. They didn't see anybody. And then there was a third person, and they didn't see anybody on the stairwell either. But the Warren Commission wouldn't talk to those other two women. They would only talk to this one. And, so it's just, again, one thing after the next. I went through this kind of fast. I was thinking I was going to last about an hour, but apparently not. What's the point? I mentioned this before. If you think killing a president in broad daylight in a major U.S. city is nothing, or it's in the past, we should forget about it. Well, think about the hangover from the JFK assassination. I'll wrap that up with that in a second here. But if you want to just be one of those people that breathlessly repeat what the mainstream media says, that Oswald acted alone, and not really caring what's been done, as long as some people don't care because he was a Democrat. I've had that discussion. People, and they didn't care for him. So who cares? Well, again, it gets right back to the stuff I talk about in the show all the time. When your side does it, it's okay. We're going to boycott the Winter Olympics this year, and that's okay. If Donald Trump boycotted the Winter Olympics, Democrats would lose their fucking mind. But because it's Joe Biden, they don't care. But that's the thing, though, is if people can get away with this, and you look at the thing I was saying a second ago was we've been in a massive hangover from the JFK assassination. Medgar Evers got shot before JFK. That's rarely ever talked about. But then after JFK, look what happened. Malcolm X, right? Martin Luther King, Bobby Kennedy, Fred Hampton. It just goes on and on and on. And then we escalated the war in Vietnam, right? I mean, Johnson's Great Society, he just shot that square in the ass. The couple of the few cool things he did, like Medicare, Voting Rights Act, Civil Rights Act, things that Kennedy was trying to get done, that Johnson did get done. He squandered all that political capital, squandered away the possibility of his great society, where there was going to be a safety net and people, working people would get taken care of and having their taxpayer dollars work for them, and not for, oligarchs and corporations, which is what we evolved into, isn't it? We're now an inverted totalitarianism, right? Look at the general mistrust after Watergate, right? And then couple that with the Kennedy assassination, couple that with, what we've seen us go to war for, which is basically bullshit. And now we're saber rattling a nuclear power without any question at all. That we're saber rattling Russia and China now. We just got our asses kicked in Afghanistan for 20 years, and we murdered millions of people in the Middle East in the last 20 years. And what are we doing about it? Nothing. And so that's the kind of thing I'm talking about. If I've seen this written quite a lot, and I believe this opinion, that until we get to the bottom of this, the assassination of John F. Kennedy, we are never going to fully move forward as a country. And I don't think people realize, to the degree that this is no longer a democracy. We have a money party with two wings. One is a right wing and one is a kind of right wing. And the only differences between the two are gays, guns, and abortion. They take the money from the same places. They do the same bidding of the same corporate donors, with the exception of the NRA, who basically only have Republicans. Every lobby in this country has both sides locked up, whether it's AIPAC or the oil lobby or the big tech lobby. It doesn't matter. It's all corporate. It's all corporate owned. It's all corporate owned and operated. And this is the thing that frustrates me when people pretend like America's so whiz-bang fucking awesome. They just had elections in Nicaragua. Right away, we're saying, no, they're not valid. Well, there was 6 parties running, and the representatives for all 6 parties were sitting in the rooms where these votes were being counted, and they watched the votes be counted. Did we do that here? I'm not saying that Trump had the election, quote, stolen from him, but don't you think it's interesting that the people in charge weren't allowing anyone to watch the ballots be counted? Not reporters, not anybody. And they were putting up, brown paper in the windows so you couldn't see in. In Nicaragua, it's paper ballots, none of this computer shit. And you got a henna stain on your thumb. Henna lasts a while. If you know what henna is, it's an ink you can't wash off within a few days. It stays on your thumb. So you can't go vote again. They had everyone's name down. All you had to do is show up, show your ID, and boom, you're voting. That's it. And they had, like I said, 6 parties ran, 3 right-wing parties that we support. The party that Daniel Ortega, the Sandinista party, which won, he won again. And why is that? I don't know. Maybe because they have jobs and despite sanctions, and he's able to provide medical for his people and affordable housing and a good living wage, which, if you recall, in 2009, we had the president of Honduras, Manuel Zelaya, arrested in his pajamas for the crime of raising the minimum wage. And Chiquita Banana, formerly United Fruit, and that name should ring a bell if you pay attention to this kind of crap, because they've been responsible for pretty much every shit thing we've done in Central and South America for the last 100 years. Including John Foster Dulles, who was a Secretary of State under Eisenhower, who was Alan Dulles' brother. So if you're starting to see how this kind of connects the dots, the players, it's almost all the same players, right? Like if you go see a Woody Allen movie, pretty much all the same actors. You might find some new generational people like, oh, hey, there's Scarlett Johansson, who's done like 5 of his movies, but he pretty much works with the same folks, right? Wes Anderson pretty much works with the same people. Same thing with this. They pretty much work with the same people. And that's it, really. So hopefully you'll check out Reclaiming Parkland. Like I said, it's a great book. Anything that's going to tell you that Oswald acted alone is a lie, or it's written by somebody who's just a pathetic corporate ass kiss who wants to be in favor with the chewy blue check assholes, or the crunchy red assholes, depending on where they come from, because both sides of the aisle do this shit. Both sides of the aisle like to think it's over, it's settled, it was Oswald. And no. And again, to those of you who have ever shot a gun, who think Oswald acted alone, go shoot a gun again. Go to the driving range and see what bullets really do. They don't do what this one did. It's a physical impossibility. But I guess if I'm going to use phony physics and bullshit mathematics, I can just say that I can catch an elephant from a rooftop on the head of a pin and draw it out to prove that I'm right. That being said, guys, like I said, thebittertruth.info. Please subscribe on YouTube. I'd appreciate the help. Trying to get to 1,000 subscribers, and I'm dealing with algorithm stuff. And also, too, I've not been really great about promoting things beyond just Facebook and Twitter. And, I don't know what else I got to do, but hoping this stuff helps you out. The idea is to have the information in front of you. And go from there. So like I said, thebittertruth.info. And as always, if this stuff makes you uncomfortable, it's supposed to. Sleep tight.